In this video, we are going to be analyzing the evolution of consciousness from a property dualist interactionist perspective. I will identify an evolutionary process that is happening and show there must be a moment in time that I call the initial alteration if our assumptions of interactionism and evolution are true. If you have not seen my previous video, Interactionism, Evolution, and Four Essential Concepts, I strongly recommend you do so before continuing. In that video, I list four essential concepts that we are going to be referencing in this video. They are the existence of the neural correlates of consciousness, the fact that the mind changes the behavior of matter in the brain from what would be expected if that matter was behaving purely by the conventions of physics and chemistry, that it is more than one or two objects in the brain that give rise to and react to the mind, and the fourth is this theory of evolution by mutation and natural selection. Now, in a property dualist interactionist perspective, how does consciousness evolve over time? To answer this question, let's look back to our nearest common ancestor with chimpanzees for an example. This group of organisms is called Hominini by taxonomists. If we can assume that chimps have some form of subjective experience, which I believe we can infer from their behavior, and this seems to be the majority opinion in the interactionist viewpoint, then this creature most likely also had some form of subjective experience. It experienced pain and pleasure, and had some primitive reasoning abilities, probably more so nearer to a chimp's than a human. One might ask, how do we arrive at the consciousness humans have today from that of said ancestor? Well, there were mutations that happened when these organisms reproduced. One place these mutations happened was in the brain. Some of these mutations would have changed the neural correlates of consciousness for that creature in some way. Some of these changes would have been harmful, perhaps rendering the creature mentally unstable. Others of these changes would have been beneficial, possibly making the creature more creative somehow. These organisms who gained evolutionary benefit would have outcompeted their rivals and passed these genes on to the next generation. This process happened repeatedly. A mutation leading to a change in the neural correlates of consciousness for that creature when compared to its parent, a change in behavior of matter in the brain, and the changes that lead to evolutionary benefit being carried over until we arrive at humans today. This follows if we accept both an interactionist perspective as well as accept an evolutionary model of the development of life. Now, this process is very similar to the evolutionary process for the development of any feature of an organism. So what's the difference? Well, when we're assuming an interactionist point of view, the difference is that, there are two key differences. Now, when we're talking about evolution of the mind, we don't necessarily mean evolution of the brain. Now, there could certainly be evolution regarding structures in the brain that do not involve the mind. But changes in the mind are results of changes in the brain. Now, the first major difference is that the mind makes a change in the behavior of matter from that which would be assumed if its behavior was governed purely by the conventions of chemistry and physics as understood. So this would be essential concept number 2. When creatures evolve most features such as horns, teeth, muscles, bones, the behavior of the matter involved behaves according to the rules of physics and chemistry. It's utilized in a way that is consistent with the rules of physics and chemistry. The second major difference between the evolution of the mind and evolution of purely physical features of an organism is the mind itself. Not only is there a change in the structure of the matter in the body, as would happen in the evolution of any new feature, there is another aspect of reality that is being altered along with the structure of the matter in the organism. In the property dualist interactionist model, we call this other aspect of reality a non-physical property. But notice, in both, evolutionary benefit as a product of the mutation is important for it to be passed down to future generations. Following in an interactionist perspective, we can see in the evolution of consciousness of creatures on Earth, there is a process where the behavior of matter is being continually altered within the brain from generation to generation. Life has not always existed, so this has to have been a finite process with a beginning. A first change in behavior of matter from what would have been expected if it were behaving purely by the conventions of physics and chemistry. Now, I will refer to this moment in time as the first alteration. There are many questions and possibilities regarding the initial alteration, such as in what organism did it take place? When did it take place? What matter was involved? I will examine some of these questions and more in subsequent videos. But I believe the initial alteration is an extremely important implication of interactionism and opens up many possibilities, including experimental possibilities, which I will also go into why I think it opens up experimental possibilities in subsequent videos. But for now, for this video, I simply want to show that if we assume both interactionism and evolution, there is a necessary first instance of change in behavior of matter and an organism in our evolutionary past.